Hi, and welcome to a new episode of English Without Limit. I'm Julia, and today I want to start with a simple but powerful question. Have you ever listened to someone speak English, understood almost everything, but when it was your turn to respond, your mind just froze? Maybe you knew the words. Maybe you've studied for years, but something still blocked the natural flow. If that sounds like you, I want you to know you are not alone. This is more common than you think, and the solution might be simpler than you expect. Today, I'm going to help you unlock that part of your brain that already understands English, but isn't yet confident in using it freely. We're going to talk about how to train your brain to think in English while you listen. And yes, that is completely possible even if you're not fluent yet. So, before we dive into the techniques, let me just say this. I'm really glad you're here. Whether this is your first episode or you've been following for a while, this space is for learners like you. People who are doing their best, showing up, and looking for practical ways to improve. Not perfect ways, practical ones. You don't need a perfect accent. You don't need to memorize 10 rules. You just need a clear mindset, some useful habits, and a little consistency. If that's what you're looking for, you're in the right place. Now, let's go back to that feeling I mentioned. When you listen, understand the words, but sans respond. That's not because you're bad at English. It's not because your brain is slow. It's because you're still translating. You hear a sentence. Then you quickly try to understand it in your native language. And then you try to build a response in English. And while your brain is doing all that, the conversation moves on. It's frustrating. But guess what? That process can be changed. You can stop translating and start thinking in English. And one of the best ways to start is by changing how you listen. Let me ask you this. Have you ever watched a movie in English? And for a moment, you forgot you were watching it in another language? You were so focused on the scene, the emotion, the story, that your brain just got it without working so hard. That's the feeling I want you to have more often. That's what I mean by thinking in English while you listen. It's not about catching every single word. It's not about grammar. It's about connection, intuition, and trust in your brain's ability to understand. Maybe you've tried listening to podcasts or watching series, but it still feels difficult. You pause, rewind, check the subtitles. You feel like you're not improving. I get it. That used to be me with Spanish. I thought I needed more vocabulary or a better textbook. But the moment I changed my approach to listening, everything started to shift. I stopped chasing every word and started focusing on meaning. I started listening like I was part of the conversation, not like I was doing a test. That's the mindset I want to help you develop. So here's what today is really about: helping you move from passive listening to active thinking. I'll share stories of real people who made this shift and practical steps you can use right after this episode. You don't need to wait months to feel progress. You can start today. But before we go any further, I want to invite you to take a second and support this podcast. If you're enjoying this kind of content, and it's helping you feel less alone in your learning journey, please follow us, leave a like, or share it with someone who's also learning English. It's a small action that helps us reach more learners around the world. who might be feeling stuck just like you were. I want to create a space here where English learning feels friendly, possible, and even fun, where we're not afraid to make mistakes, where we celebrate progress, even the small ones. And I want to remind you, listening is not a passive skill. It's a mental exercise. You're not just hearing sounds. You're building a map in your brain. You're creating meaning. And the more you practice thinking in English while you listen, the easier everything else becomes. Speaking, understanding, responding, it all starts to connect. So take a deep breath. Relax your shoulders. You don't need to be perfect. You're here to grow, and you're doing exactly that just by listening right now. Maybe you're walking, driving, cooking, or just taking a break. Whatever you're doing, I want you to know that this time you're spending on your English matters. You're not just listening to a podcast. You're building the foundation of real fluency. And that starts with how you think when you listen. Have you ever heard someone say, "You need to think in English"? Maybe you nodded, but didn't really know what that meant. How do you think in another language? Does it just happen? Is there a secret? The truth is, it doesn't happen all at once. It's a process. And that process begins not when you speak, but when you listen. Listening is the first moment where English enters your mind. So if you want to think in English, you need to change how that moment feels. You need to stop translating and start connecting directly with meaning. That's why this episode is so important. It's not just about improving your listening skills. It's about changing your experience with English. Imagine what would happen if listening became enjoyable. If you could watch a movie or join a Zoom call and actually follow the conversation without feeling lost. Imagine the confidence you'd feel, the freedom. That's what I want for you. And that's what we're building together, one episode at a time. So thank you for choosing to spend this moment with me. Thank you for showing up. Even if your English isn't where you want it to be yet, you're here. You're learning. And I promise, what you'll hear in this episode can make a real difference. If you apply it, let's do this together. Let's take listening something you do every day and turn it into a tool that transforms the way you think in English. When we talk about listening comprehension, most learners imagine it's just about hearing English words, understanding their meanings, and putting everything together as quickly as possible. That seems logical. You hear a sentence, and your brain works hard to recognize the words, translate them into your native language, and then reconstruct the meaning. But this isn't real listening, at least not the kind that leads to fluency. Real listening in English is not just about hearing and decoding. It's about catching meaning as it flows, about seeing patterns, feeling the rhythm of the language, and letting go of the need to stop and translate. I meet so many learners who believe they're not good at English listening, simply because they don't catch every word. They say, "I watch a movie and I get lost," or "I listen to podcasts, but I have to pause and check the dictionary all the time." If that's your experience, I want to tell you something important. This struggle is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're using the wrong strategy. You're not broken. Your brain is working fine. You've just been trained to focus on the wrong thing, on translating instead of understanding ideas. Let me share a story with you. Sarah, is a graphic designer from Rome. She started learning English in school like many people do, with lots of grammar, vocabulary lists, and exercises. When she moved into the professional world, she needed to understand English in meetings, emails, and international design projects. So she did what she had always done. She tried to be perfect. Every time someone spoke English to her, she paused mentally and translated every word. Her eyes would focus, her brain would tense, and her shoulders would rise slightly. She was trying to keep up, word by word. The result? She was always behind in conversations. By the time she figured out what someone had said, they were already 2 or 3 sentences ahead. In group meetings, she avoided speaking because she was afraid of missing something. She told me once, "I felt like my brain was in a race it could never win." She was constantly translating, analyzing, and falling behind. And the worst part was that she thought this was normal, that maybe she just wasn't good at languages. But then, something changed. One evening, she was watching a documentary in English about photography. She had subtitles on, like always. But halfway through the episode, she realized she wasn't reading the subtitles anymore. She was just watching, just listening. She couldn't explain why, but the words felt clearer. The phrases made sense. She was no longer trying to grab each word. She was following the idea of what was being said. It wasn't about understanding everything. It was about understanding enough to stay connected to the story. That moment was a turning point. She realized that real comprehension doesn't happen through translation. It happens through trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in your brain. She began practicing this new way of listening. No more pausing every 5 seconds. No more checking the dictionary. She would listen to podcasts during her morning walk, even if she didn't understand every part. Instead of focusing on what she didn't know, she started noticing what she could understand. And little by little, her confidence grew. We talked about it later, and she said something I'll never forget. When I stopped needing to understand everything, I started understanding more. That's exactly it. Comprehension isn't about control. It's about presence. You need to be present with the speaker. You need to stay with the message even if some words are missing. The goal is not perfect understanding, it's connection. Sarah's experience isn't unique. I've heard this same transformation in learners from different places. People from Paris, Athens, Oslo, Dublin. The same pattern shows up again and again. As long as you're trying to translate every word, you're stuck in delay mode. You're reacting, not listening. But when you shift your focus to the message, when you allow yourself to miss details but stay present with the speaker, something opens up. You begin to think in English. You start to follow the rhythm and flow instead of fighting it. This shift isn't always comfortable at first. It might feel like you're losing control. You might feel frustrated when you don't catch a word, but that's part of the process. Listening in English is a mental habit, and like any habit, it takes time to rewire. Sarah gave herself permission to stay in the moment, even when it felt messy, and that's what changed everything. I want you to think about your own listening habits. Do you pause and replay constantly? Do you feel anxious if you miss a word? Do you grab your phone to look up phrases as you listen? These behaviors might feel helpful, but they're often signs that you're still translating. And translating is the very thing slowing you down. It's like trying to run while carrying a heavy bag. At some point, you have to drop the bag. If you want to move freely, here's something simple you can try. The next time you listen to something in English, a podcast, a video, even a voicemail, don't aim for 100% comprehension. Instead, aim to follow the idea. Pay attention to the tone, the speaker's emotion, the context. What are they trying to say? What's the big picture? Let your brain relax and listen like a native speaker does. Not for perfection, but for meaning. That's what real listening is. And once you start practicing this way, you'll notice a shift. You'll stop chasing words and you'll start moving with the language. Just like Sarah, who once felt slow and nervous, and now listens with confidence and calm. This is what happens when we stop focusing on every little piece and start seeing the bigger pattern. You stop translating and you start thinking in English. One of the biggest shifts you can make as an English learner is moving from translating to truly thinking in English. Most people don't realize how much translation slows them down. It creates a barrier between what you hear and how you understand it. You might not even notice it at first, because translation feels like the natural thing to do. You hear a sentence, your brain translates it into your native language, then you try to understand the message and respond. But here's the problem: that process is heavy. It adds an extra step between listening and understanding, and it keeps you from becoming fluent. If you want to listen better, you have to change how your brain handles the language. You need to connect English directly to meaning. No middle language, no translation step in between. I've seen this with so many learners, but one example always comes to mind. Pierre, a software engineer from Lyon, used to tell me how nervous he felt in English meetings. His team worked across several countries, and every Monday morning they had a video call in English. During those meetings, Pierre's main goal was not to contribute ideas or understand the strategy. His focus was survival. He would open a notebook and write down everything people said line by line, not just notes. He tried to write full sentences. Then after the meeting, he would spend up to an hour translating everything into French word by word. He thought this was helping him improve, but in reality, it was keeping him stuck. Each week, Pierre ended those meetings exhausted. Even though he had the information, he couldn't respond during the call. He needed time to process, to translate, to double-check his understanding. He was afraid to speak because he worried about making mistakes. His English was good on paper, but in real time he felt frozen. And that's what happens when we rely too much on translation. It gives us information, but it steals our confidence. It creates distance between you and the language, and it turns communication into a stressful puzzle. After several months of frustration, Pierre decided to try something different. Instead of writing down full sentences and translating later, he challenged himself to listen differently. I remember the day he told me about the shift. He said, "This time, I didn't write anything. I just imagined what they were saying." That was the key. Instead of translating words, he started visualizing situations. When someone said, "We're launching the update next Friday," he didn't translate that sentence into French. He pictured the update being released, imagined his team getting ready, saw the project in his mind. That small change completely transformed his experience. The difference wasn't about vocabulary. Pierre didn't learn new words overnight. What changed was how he processed English. His brain began connecting English words directly to ideas, images, and feelings. He started listening with intention, not as a translator, but as a participant in the conversation. Over time, he began to respond faster. He no longer needed to pause, think in French, and translate back to English. The sentences came more naturally, and the pressure disappeared. This change didn't happen instantly. At first it felt strange. His hand wanted to reach for the pen. His brain wanted to go back to the old system of translating and organizing everything. But he kept practicing. He listened. He pictured the message. And he trusted himself. After a few weeks, he noticed something incredible. He started remembering more from the meetings. Even without writing anything down, the main ideas stayed with him. That's because his brain was finally treating English as a living language, not a subject to be translated and memorized. I tell Pierre's story because it shows exactly what needs to happen. When you want to stop translating and start thinking in English, it's not just about listening more or learning new phrases. It's about changing how you experience English in real time. You have to train your brain to treat English as something familiar and direct, not as a code that needs to be broken. Not as something you get right, just as something you understand and use, moment by moment. You can start doing this in your own life, even in small ways. The next time you watch a video or listen to a podcast in English, try not to write things down. Don't pause to translate. Instead, close your eyes and picture what's being said. Let the words create images in your mind. Let the sentences become actions, people, situations. This builds a strong connection between English and meaning. And that's where fluency begins. Pierre still joins his weekly meetings, but now he participates without fear. He asks questions. He gives updates. He shares ideas without a notebook and without translation. He listens. He understands. And he responds. And he does it because he shifted the way his brain processes English. He stopped making English pass through a filter. And he started thinking with the language itself. That's the goal. Not perfect grammar. Not remembering every word. The real goal is simple. To hear something in English and feel like it makes sense, without needing to switch languages inside your head. This change can happen for anyone. It doesn't depend on age, background, or years of study. It depends on how you listen and how you train your mind to respond. Thinking in English is not magic. It's a habit. It's built through consistent exposure, active listening, and the courage to stop translating. When you let go of that habit, you make space for real understanding, real connection, and real communication. That's what transforms your English. Not just what you know, but how you use it. One of the most powerful tools you can use to improve your English listening is something you already do in your daily life, even without thinking about it. Visualization. When you listen in English, don't just hear the words, picture them. Imagine the situation, the people, the actions, the mood. Turn the sounds into scenes in your mind. This is what I call visual listening. It's a way to connect what you hear directly with meaning, without stopping to translate or analyze. When you picture what someone is saying, you don't just understand the words, you experience them. And that's what makes the language come alive. Let me explain what this looks like in practice. Imagine someone says, "I'm walking to the train station because I missed the bus." Now, you could try to translate that sentence into your native language and then make sense of it. But instead, try this. Close your eyes and see the person in your mind. Maybe they're walking fast. Maybe it's cold outside. Maybe they look a little frustrated. You picture the train station in the distance, the street they're walking on, the time of day. You don't need every word to be perfect. What you need is the image, the action, the idea. That's where comprehension becomes natural. They're what make the scene move. Nouns are the people and things. They're what give the scene shape. If you hear, "She's cooking dinner while listening to music," just focus on cooking, dinner, and music. You don't need every little word. Just imagine the action. Is she in a kitchen? What kind of food is she making? What music is playing? Your brain fills in the rest, and in doing that, you're learning in a way that's much more powerful than translation. Another way to use visual listening is by turning it into a habit with your favorite content. Pick a podcast, a short video, or even a song. Listen to a short bit, maybe 20 or 30 seconds. Then pause, close your eyes, and ask yourself, what did I just hear? Not the words, but the scene. Can I see it in my mind? If you can picture it, you understood it. If not, don't worry. Listen again. Try to find the key words that help you create the image. This exercise trains your brain to focus on meaning instead of individual words. This also works really well when you're watching videos or series in English. Try muting the subtitles for a few moments and just watch the body language and listen to the tone of voice. Then close your eyes and play a sentence again. Try to see the moment in your head. Where are the people? What are they doing? What's happening between them? That kind of practice builds intuition. And intuition is what makes listening feel easy. Sometimes I do this exercise live with my students. I'll say a sentence, and they'll draw or describe the scene to me. What kind of expression does the man have? Is he in a hurry? That moment when they stop thinking about grammar and start creating the scene, that's when their listening improves instantly. They're no longer decoding. They're understanding naturally. Now, I know this might feel strange at first. If you're used to studying English in a more traditional way, you might feel like this is too simple or not academic enough. But remember, the goal isn't to pass a test, it's to feel comfortable with the language. And the way to do that is by using the same strategies your brain already uses in your first language. You don't translate when someone tells you a story in your own language. You see it, you feel it, you understand it through images and context. That's what we want to build in English too. So try to make this part of your routine. Even for 5 minutes a day. Pick something to listen to. Close your eyes and turn the words into pictures. Let your imagination guide you. You'll notice that you begin to recognize phrases more quickly. You'll stop needing to translate in your head. You'll feel more confident, more connected, and more fluent, not because you've memorized more, but because you're finally processing English the way fluent speakers do. And one more tip. If you ever get stuck, don't panic. Just return to the core of the sentence. What is the action? Who is involved? Where is it happening? These three questions, what, who, and where, can help you build the picture every time. The rest is just detail. And the more you do this, the easier it gets. Visual listening is not a trick or a shortcut. It's a shift in how you experience language. Instead of working hard to catch every sound, you start trusting your brain to understand meaning through imagery. You become an active listener, not just a passive one. You engage with English in a way that is real, emotional, and memorable. And that is the kind of learning that lasts. One of the biggest mindset shifts you can make as an English learner is learning to get comfortable with not understanding everything. I know how uncomfortable that might sound. Most of us are taught that in order to succeed, we have to be sure, precise, and correct. But when it comes to real conversations in English, the truth is, even native speakers don't catch every word. They don't always understand every phrase, especially in noisy places, or when someone speaks quickly, uses slang, or has a different accent. What helps them keep the conversation going is not perfect comprehension, but confidence in managing uncertainty. And that's exactly what you can develop too. I want you to imagine a moment in a conversation where someone says something and you only catch half of it. Maybe you understand the beginning, but the middle part is unclear. Maybe you hear a few words you know, but the rest is too fast. Now ask yourself, what do you usually do in that moment? Do you panic? Do you mentally freeze? Do you give up on trying to understand the rest? These reactions are normal, but they don't help you grow. Instead, I want to show you that moments like these are actually a powerful opportunity to build your listening muscles. When we let go of the pressure to understand everything perfectly, we create space to focus on what really matters: tone, rhythm, keywords, and intention. These are the things that help us stay connected to the message, even when we don't hear every detail. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine someone says, "Hey, sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible and I couldn't find a place to park." Now, let's say you missed the middle part. You only hear, "Hey, sorry I'm late. Couldn't find a place." Even with those fragments, you probably understand what happened. Your brain fills in the missing pieces. Why? Because you picked up the tone of apology, the rhythm of casual speech, and some essential words like sorry, late, and place. That's what I mean by comfortable uncertainty. You don't need every single word to understand the meaning. You just need the main signals. You can think of them as clues that your brain uses to solve the message. And over time, the more you practice listening for these clues, instead of stressing over missing pieces, the more naturally you begin to understand English in real time. One very useful technique is to shift your attention from the individual words to the speaker's tone and rhythm. Tone tells you how someone feels. Are they excited? Nervous? Bored? Joking? Upset? Rhythm tells you how they're organizing their thoughts. Are they speaking quickly because they're in a rush? Slowly, because they want you to understand something important? These two elements can give you so much information, even if you don't catch every word. Another helpful tool is identifying keywords. These are the words that carry the meaning of the sentence. Usually, they're nouns, verbs, and sometimes adjectives or adverbs. You don't need to hear all the articles or prepositions to know what's going on. For example, if someone says, "Yesterday, I went to the museum with my friend to see the new photography exhibition," the key words might be yesterday went, museum, friend, photography exhibition. If you catch those, you understand the essence. If you miss a few connecting words like to or with, it doesn't stop your comprehension. You can train yourself to listen for these key words by choosing a short piece of audio and writing down just the key points after listening. Don't try to write everything. Just ask yourself, what were the 3 most important words in that sentence or paragraph? This helps you focus on meaning instead of form. It also teaches your brain to prioritize, which is what fluent listeners do naturally. There's something very freeing about accepting that you won't understand everything. It takes the pressure off. It allows you to be present in the moment and engage with the language as it's spoken, not as something you need to control or perfect. I've seen learners transform their listening skills just by letting go of the need to catch it all. They stop feeling tense. Their ears start opening up. They become more relaxed, more curious, and more in tune with the natural flow of English. Let me tell you about a small group I worked with during an online listening workshop. One of the participants, Elena from Vienna, had a habit of writing down entire conversations word for word, trying to catch every single sentence. She told me that every time she missed something, she felt like a failure. So, we did a simple exercise. I played a short clip of someone describing their weekend plans, and I asked the group not to take notes, not to pause, not to rewind. Their only task was to listen once and write down 3 words that described what the speaker was doing. At first, Elena felt nervous, like it wouldn't be enough. But after the exercise, she said she was surprised at how much she remembered. She didn't need all the details. She got the message, and that was enough. That moment taught her something important. She realized that real listening isn't about perfection. It's about staying connected to the meaning. It's about being okay with the unknown and learning to work with what you do understand. And I think that's one of the most important skills you can build as an English learner. Because in the real world, conversations are messy. People interrupt each other, speak fast, make mistakes. There's background noise, different accents, and unexpected topics. The people who thrive in these situations are not the ones who know the most vocabulary. They're the ones who stay calm, listen for the key parts, and let the rest go. You don't need to be perfect to be fluent. You just need to be flexible. If you can stay curious and relaxed in moments of uncertainty, you're already doing what fluent speakers do. And the more you practice this, the more confident you'll become. It's not about how many words you know. It's about how well you use the ones you recognize and how you let context guide your understanding. So, the next time you're listening to someone speak English and you don't catch every word, I want you to take a breath and keep going. Focus on what you do hear. Notice the tone, the rhythm, the energy of the speaker. Pay attention to the main words. Let your brain make connections. Even if some parts are missing, that's not failure. That's listening in a real human way. And it's one of the most valuable skills you can build on your path to fluency. One of the biggest lessons I've learned through teaching English is that progress doesn't come from doing a lot in one day. It comes from doing a little every day. When you're trying to improve your listening skills, the most powerful thing you can do is stay consistent. Not perfect. Not intense. Just consistent. Listening to English for 5 or 10 minutes each day can have a greater impact than listening for an hour once a week and then stopping. I've seen this work over and over, and one story that always stays with me is Jonas's. Jonas is a photographer from Berlin. He came to me after trying many different methods to improve his English. He had studied the language in school, taken advanced grammar classes, and even joined a few conversation groups. But when it came to real-life listening, he still felt stuck. He told me he understood the words, but his brain wasn't keeping up. When native speakers talked, he said it felt like trying to catch a train that was already moving too fast. Every time he started to focus, the sentence was already over. At first, Jonas believed he needed more vocabulary. Then he thought maybe his grammar wasn't strong enough. But the truth was simpler than that. His listening muscles just weren't being trained consistently. He was jumping from one voice to another, from one video to another, and his brain never had time to adjust. I suggested something very different. Choose one English podcast, just one, and listen to it every day. Not to finish as many episodes as possible, but to build a habit, to get comfortable with one voice, and to stay in the rhythm of the language. He picked a podcast hosted by a native English speaker from New York. At first, the accent felt fast to him, but that was part of the process. He started listening to 10 minutes every morning during breakfast. No distractions, no pressure. He didn't try to understand every word. He just let the voice become familiar. After the first week, he chose one episode and repeated it for 3 days in a row. He told me it felt strange at first, like he wasn't moving forward. But by the 3rd day, something clicked. He didn't need to focus so hard on each sentence. He was beginning to understand the rhythm. The words didn't feel like noise anymore. They had shape and flow. After 2 weeks, Jonas added a new layer to his practice. He started shadowing. That means he would listen to one sentence, pause the audio, and repeat it out loud, trying to match the tone, the speed, even the breathing of the speaker. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about training his mouth and ears to work together. He said it felt like a workout, and some days it was frustrating, but he kept going, one step at a time. By the end of the first month, something had shifted. Jonas stopped translating in his head. The need to switch between English and German slowly faded away. He said, "I don't know how it happened, but now I hear the sentence and I just get it. That's the moment I love witnessing in learners. When they move from passive listening, just hearing sounds, to active understanding, where English becomes something they think in, not just something they study. Jonas didn't use special apps or expensive courses. He used one free podcast, one voice, and daily repetition. And that's why it worked. Because his brain had the chance to adjust. It stopped feeling overwhelmed by too many accents, too many expressions, or too much new input. Instead, it focused, slowly adapted, and grew stronger through regular contact with a familiar voice. I want to emphasize something important here. Jonas didn't understand everything in the beginning. He didn't pause to look up every word. He didn't force himself to memorize expressions. He simply showed up every day. He listened. He shadowed. And he allowed himself to be okay with not being perfect. That's where the real transformation happens. When you stop needing to master everything at once and start trusting the process of small, consistent steps. So, if you're feeling stuck with your listening skills, I encourage you to try what Jonas did. Pick one podcast or YouTube channel. Choose a voice that feels clear to you, even if it's a little fast. Make it your daily companion. Listen to the same episodes more than once. Practice shadowing. Let yourself grow familiar with the rhythm and tone of that speaker. Your brain will begin to adjust. You'll start recognizing words and phrases more quickly. You'll stop translating so much. And eventually, you'll find yourself thinking in English without even realizing it. This kind of practice doesn't require a lot of time. Just 10 minutes a day is enough to start. The key is repetition. When you hear the same voice and the same patterns repeatedly, your brain builds strong connections. It learns to expect what's coming, to recognize intonation, to fill in meaning even when you miss a word. And that's what fluent listening really is. It's not about hearing perfectly. It's about understanding naturally. Jonas continued this habit for 2 months. By the end, he told me something that made me smile. He said, "Now, when I listen, it feels like I'm listening to a friend." That's how comfortable the voice had become. And more importantly, that's how comfortable he had become with the language. It was no longer something outside of him. It was part of his daily rhythm, part of his thinking, part of his voice. That's what I want for you. Not to study harder or learn faster, but to build a steady, reliable connection with English through daily listening with one voice, one show, one step at a time. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to show up, listen, and let the language sink in slowly. Over time, it becomes something that lives inside you, not as something you translate, but as something you understand, feel, and speak with confidence. Sometimes, the fastest way to improve your English listening is by slowing everything down. I know that might sound strange, especially when your goal is to understand native speakers who talk quickly, use contractions, and speak in a rhythm that often feels like a blur. But here's the truth. Trying to understand fast English before you've built a solid foundation is like trying to run before you've learned how to walk. And that's why slow listening is one of the most powerful tools you can use, especially if you often feel overwhelmed. by the speed of native conversations. I've seen this work with so many learners. When they slow down their listening practice, literally reduce the playback speed of what they're hearing, they give their brain the time it needs to process the sounds, the rhythm, the structure of the language. They're no longer racing to keep up. They're training with intention, with clarity, and with focus. And that kind of listening doesn't just build comprehension, it builds confidence. Let me walk you through what slow listening actually looks like. Imagine you're listening to a podcast in English. The speaker is talking at a natural speed, and after a few seconds, you already feel lost. Maybe you understood the beginning, but then everything starts blending together. Your mind can't keep up, and your focus starts to slip. In that moment, instead of giving up, or just listening without understanding, try this. Slow it down. Most audio and video platforms today let you reduce the speed to 0.9x or 0.75x. It's a small adjustment, but it can make a big difference. At that slower speed, suddenly, the words don't crash into each other. You start to hear the spaces between them. You notice the intonation, the way the speaker's voice rises and falls. You hear individual sounds more clearly. It's not about making the speaker sound strange or robotic. It's about giving yourself space to catch up, to connect the dots, and to hear what's really being said. When you combine slow playback with repetition, you create a learning environment that's both supportive and effective. Instead of listening to a long episode all at once, choose a short clip, maybe 30 seconds, or even just one sentence. Play it slowly. Listen once, then again, then one more time. Each time, ask yourself, what do I hear now that I didn't hear before? What word or phrase stands out more clearly? What's the emotion or meaning behind the tone? This kind of detailed listening builds the foundation that later allows you to understand faster speech without stress. I want to share something I do often with beginners. I pick a short dialogue and play it slowly, then have them shadow it. Shadowing is when you repeat the sentence out loud, immediately after hearing it, trying to match the pronunciation, rhythm, and tone as closely as possible. At normal speed, this is really hard at first, but when we slow it down, something amazing happens. They start to hear how the words connect. They realize that what looked difficult on the page is actually just a natural sound pattern, and as they repeat it a few times, it starts to feel familiar. They're not just repeating sounds, they're understanding them from the inside. One of my students, Dario from Milan, used to get completely overwhelmed by fast English. He said it was like trying to listen to a race car zooming past. He could catch the color, maybe a number, but not the whole picture. I encouraged him to choose his favorite TV show in English and re-watch one short scene, but this time at 75% speed. He hesitated at first, thinking it would be too easy or boring. But after trying it for a week, he came back to me and said, "It's the first time I felt like I actually understand what they're saying." The slower speed gave him the confidence to break the sentence into smaller parts and really hear how people speak in everyday English. That's the real power of slow listening. It doesn't just help you understand, It helps you train. Just like athletes slow down their movements. When they're learning a new skill, you can slow down English to focus on the mechanics. Where do the words connect? How do the sounds change when spoken naturally? What words are stressed and which ones are dropped? These are things that go unnoticed when the audio moves too quickly, but when you slow it down, they become clear. And once they're clear, they become part of how you listen. Another benefit of slow listening is that it helps reduce anxiety. So many learners feel pressure to keep up with native speakers. But what if you took that pressure away? What if instead of trying to race through content, you gave yourself permission to pause, to go back, to take your time? That kind of mindset shift can change everything. Suddenly, listening becomes less about proving yourself and more about exploring the language. And the more relaxed you are, the more your brain is able to absorb. This is also a great way to work on pronunciation. When you hear a sentence slowly and you repeat it out loud, you start to notice where your pronunciation feels different from the speaker's. You might realize that you're stressing the wrong syllable, or that a sound you thought you were saying correctly actually needs a small adjustment. These small corrections build up over time, and they lead to more natural, confident speaking. That's why slow listening and shadowing go so well together. One helps your ears, the other helps your mouth. And together, they help you think in English, not just understand it. If you're wondering how to start this today, it's simple. Pick a piece of content you already enjoy. Maybe it's a YouTube video, a podcast episode, or a clip from a movie. Choose a section. Just 1 minute is enough. And slow it down to 75%. Listen to it 3 times. Each time, write down the main words you hear. Then try shadowing one sentence. Speak it slowly, then a little faster. Pay attention to how the sounds feel in your mouth. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be aware. That awareness becomes understanding, and that understanding becomes fluency. Remember, slowing down is not a weakness. It's a strategy. It's how we build the foundation that allows us to go faster later. It's how we give our brain the tools it needs to make English feel natural. You're not falling behind when you slow down. You're building strength, clarity, and trust in your own process. And that trust is what carries you forward. So don't be afraid to take your time. 1 slow, focused minute of listening today could be worth more than 20 rushed minutes tomorrow. Give yourself that gift and let the learning unfold at your own pace. Shadowing is a powerful technique that I love to share with my listeners because it bridges the gap between listening and speaking in a way that feels natural and effective. When you shadow, you basically repeat what you hear, either at the same time as the speaker or immediately after. It might feel a little strange or awkward at first, but it's not about being perfect with your pronunciation or getting every word exactly right. Instead, shadowing is about training your brain and mouth to work together to connect the sounds you hear with the words you say, and to build that automatic flow of English. Let me tell you about Maya, a learner from Istanbul who shared her experience with me. Maya used to struggle with understanding English in everyday conversations. She would listen carefully, but her brain kept trying to translate everything back into Turkish before she could respond. This made speaking slow and tiring, and sometimes she lost confidence. Then she discovered shadowing, and it changed everything. Maya started small. She would take short audio clips or podcast sentences and listen while walking in the park. As she walked, she repeated the sentences right after hearing them, trying to match the speaker's rhythm and intonation. At first, she was a little self-conscious about talking to herself outdoors, but she soon realized this was her time to practice freely and confidently. What happened next was remarkable. After a few weeks of daily shadowing, Maya noticed that her brain began to think in English. She stopped pausing to translate in her head. The words and phrases came more naturally. When she spoke in casual conversations with friends or colleagues, she didn't have to mentally build her sentences piece by piece anymore. Instead, the language flowed through her. She described the experience as feeling like her brain and mouth were finally in sync, as if English was no longer a foreign language, but a familiar voice she could speak along with. The beauty of shadowing is that it trains you to listen and speak simultaneously, which is how real-life conversations work. When someone speaks to you, you don't wait until they finish before starting to think about how to respond. Your brain is already preparing your reply while you listen. Shadowing simulates this process, helping you get used to the speed and rhythm of English as it is naturally spoken. I want to be clear that shadowing isn't about sounding perfect or mimicking an accent exactly. It's about practice and connection. Your goal is to imitate the flow, the melody, and the patterns of speech. This trains your ears to recognize sounds more easily and your mouth to produce those sounds more naturally over time. This creates a feedback loop where your listening improves because your speaking practice helps your brain anticipate sounds and phrases. One simple way to start shadowing is to find a short sentence or phrase that you like. It can come from a podcast, a movie, or even a song. Listen closely, then try to repeat it immediately after you hear it. Don't worry if you don't get every word perfect. Focus on matching the rhythm and intonation. As you get more comfortable, try shadowing entire sentences or short paragraphs without stopping. The goal is to keep your voice moving as closely as possible to the speaker's voice. Another helpful tip is to use content that you enjoy and are interested in. When you care about the topic, it's easier to stay motivated and engaged. Plus, hearing words and phrases you already know or want to learn helps your brain make connections faster. For Maya, she chose podcasts about photography because it was her passion. This made her shadowing practice feel less like a chore and more like a conversation with a friend. You might wonder how shadowing helps with thinking in English. When you repeat what you hear right away, your brain doesn't have time to translate back and forth between your native language and English. Instead, it learns to process the meaning directly in English. This builds fluency because you start responding to the sounds and patterns themselves rather than to the translation. This is exactly what native speakers do. They don't translate in their heads. They just understand and respond naturally. Shadowing also strengthens your pronunciation and intonation without the pressure of formal study. When you copy the way a native speaker stresses certain words or uses rising and falling tones, your English sounds more natural and easier to understand. This makes conversations smoother and less tiring because you're using the rhythm of English instead of speaking word by word. If you're new to shadowing, start small and be patient with yourself. Even a few minutes a day can make a difference. You might feel awkward at first, and that's okay. The important thing is to keep practicing regularly. As you get used to this technique, you'll notice your listening become sharper and your speaking more fluent. Your brain will stop relying on translation and start thinking in English, just like Maya experienced. So, if you want to try shadowing today, here's a simple exercise. Pick a short clip of English audio, maybe a sentence from a podcast or a line from a movie. Listen once or twice to understand the meaning. Then play it again and repeat the words immediately after the speaker. Focus on copying the sound and rhythm. Do this several times until you feel comfortable, then move on to the next sentence. With time and consistency, you'll find yourself connecting more deeply with English, hearing it, and speaking it with greater ease. Shadowing might feel challenging at first, but it's one of the most effective ways to build that natural connection between listening and speaking. It turns passive listening into active practice, and it trains your brain to process English quickly and fluently. Just like Maya, you can start thinking in English and enjoy the feeling of speaking with confidence. Remember, this is not about perfection. It's about progress and connection. So why not give shadowing a try? Speak with the speaker and watch your English come alive. I also encourage you to think about the language you already know and use it as a foundation. Sometimes, when you hear a new word or phrase, you can guess its meaning by comparing it with what you already understand. You might recognize part of the word, or the way it's used in the sentence can remind you of a similar phrase. This is another example of how context helps your brain learn naturally. The more you practice learning from context instead of a dictionary, the more you'll notice your listening skills improve. You'll become faster at understanding because you're not stuck translating. You'll catch the meaning even when you miss some words. You'll feel more comfortable in real conversations, where people speak quickly or use slang and expressions you haven't seen in a textbook. You'll start to think in English because you'll be absorbing meaning directly from the language. So, today I challenge you to try something different. Choose your favorite English audio or video and listen for meaning without looking up every word. Pay attention to the speaker's tone and the situation. Notice any gestures or facial expressions if you can. Let your brain do what it does best. Find patterns and make connections. Trust yourself to understand more than you think. This simple mindset shift can open up a whole new way of learning English and help you move closer to fluency. When it comes to improving your English listening skills, one of the most important things I want to share with you is this. Don't limit yourself to textbook audio. Yes, textbooks and language courses can be helpful for building a foundation, but if you want to truly master listening, you need to hear real people speaking in real situations. That means podcasts, interviews, YouTube vlogs, and any content where people talk naturally, with their pauses, fillers, hesitations, and even mistakes. These authentic voices show you how English really sounds outside of a classroom and they help you build the kind of understanding you need for everyday life. I know it can feel intimidating at first to listen to real English speakers. They don't always speak clearly or slowly. They might use slang, interrupt themselves, or change topics quickly. But this is exactly why listening to real voices is so valuable. It trains your brain to handle the unpredictability of natural conversation. When you listen to scripted textbook audio, everything is clean, slow, and perfect. But real life isn't like that. Real conversations have rhythm. They have emotions. They have connection. And when you listen to those authentic voices, you're training your ears to pick up on those details. Let me tell you about Helena, a learner from Warsaw who shared her story with me. Helena was used to studying English with traditional courses and exercises. She could understand textbook dialogues well, but found it very hard to follow real conversations or interviews. She said real English felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. People talked too fast or used words she hadn't learned yet. I suggested she try something different. Every morning while making coffee, she would watch travel vlogs in English on YouTube. These were videos where travelers shared their experiences, explored new cities, and talked casually with the camera. At first, Helena admitted she didn't understand everything. The accents varied, and sometimes the speakers used expressions that were new to her. But because she watched these vlogs daily, the voices became familiar. She started noticing patterns in the way people spoke. She heard common fillers like, actually, and I mean, and she realized these phrases helped give speakers time to think, not to confuse her. Gradually, she stopped feeling overwhelmed by the unpredictability of real English and began to enjoy the variety and energy of authentic conversations. One of the beautiful things about listening to real people is that you experience the language as a living, breathing thing. You hear the natural rhythm, the rise and fall of the voice, the quick pauses, and the speed changes. You notice how people emphasize certain words to show excitement or emotion. You catch the way a question sounds different from a statement, not just in words, but in tone. All of these little details help you understand meaning beyond just the vocabulary. Helena also found that listening to real people helped her connect emotionally with the language. Because the speakers were sharing their lives, their stories, and their personalities, Helena felt like she was part of a community. This connection made her more motivated to keep listening and practicing. She started imagining herself in those conversations, thinking about what she would say if she were there. This kind of emotional engagement is key to moving from passive listening to active understanding. When you listen only to textbook audio, you miss out on this human connection. You hear the language, but you don't feel it. Real voices bring warmth, humor, hesitation, and spontaneity. These are the things that make language real and memorable. They also help you prepare for real conversations, where people don't follow scripts, and where unexpected topics or expressions come up. If you want to try listening to real people today, start by finding content that interests you. It could be a podcast about your favorite hobby, interviews with experts, or daily vlogs from people who share their lives in English. Choose topics you enjoy, because that keeps you engaged and curious. Watch or listen regularly, even if you don't understand every word. Over time, your brain will pick up the patterns and rhythms naturally. You might notice at first that real voices feel chaotic or confusing. That's normal. Real conversations are messy, but this messiness is exactly what trains your brain to be flexible and quick. Instead of freezing when you don't understand something, you learn to keep listening and use other clues, tone, context, facial expressions, if it's video, to fill in the gaps. This skill is essential for real-life fluency. I also encourage you to embrace the imperfections in real speech. People make mistakes, repeat themselves, and sometimes get off track. When you listen to these moments, you realize that fluency isn't about speaking perfectly. It's about communicating effectively and naturally. Real voices teach you this lesson better than any textbook ever can. Helena's daily habit of watching travel vlogs became a powerful tool for her listening improvement. She didn't need to spend hours studying grammar or memorizing vocabulary lists. She simply immersed herself in the natural flow of English, surrounded by real voices and real stories. This immersion helped her brain adapt, helped her feel connected, and helped her gain confidence in understanding everyday English. So if you want to build strong listening skills, I invite you to go beyond textbooks, seek out authentic English voices, and listen to how people really speak. Allow yourself to hear the pauses, the fillers, and even the mistakes. Let the rhythm and emotion of real conversation guide your understanding. This kind of listening builds real connection, not just with the language, but with the people who speak it every day. Remember, learning English is a journey, not a race. Every small step you take brings you closer to fluency. Trust the process. Embrace the mistakes. Celebrate your progress. When you listen with curiosity and practice with patience, you build a connection with English that goes beyond words. You start to think in English, feel it in your heart, and speak with confidence. So, keep going, keep listening, keep speaking. Your English journey is yours alone, and it's full of endless possibilities. Thank you for sharing this time with me. Julia, here, on English Without Limit. Until next time, take care and enjoy every step of your learning adventure.